I'm Kimberly Michelle Ford. As a child, I grew up watching my mom being abused by my sister's father. I had no idea that eventually I'd become a victim of abuse myself. I watched him abuse her twice to the point of near death. When I got a little older, there was a young man that was in my life that I'd met at the age of 5. We played around as kids. We'd run up and down the street chasing each other, but he was always very aggressive as a kid. Doing things like tripping me up to make me fall, throwing things to hit me in my face, all in the name of fun and games and jokes. At about 18, we were dating, and we'd been in and out of relationships throughout school. And about 18, I was living with my grandmother, and he'd come over to see me one night, late at night, and asked me to come outside to talk. And I had done something that he wasn't happy about, and the next thing I knew, he had grabbed me and thrown me over my grandmother's car and was in the driveway choking me. The grip was extremely tight. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was funny. And I'm just kind of laughing, saying, hey, cut it out, And I noticed that the grip didn't release for quite a while. Eventually, he let go, not because I asked him to, but because I guess he had proved his point, or whatever the message was he wanted me to get. And then he walked off and walked down the driveway. But even then, I didn't take it as I was being abused, even though I'd seen abuse. I was in denial. And it wasn't until we had moved in together about a year later, and again, I had done something that he wasn't happy about, and I had been to my grandmother's house and visited for a couple of hours that day. And when he came home, he goes, well, where were you? I was looking for you. I went by your grandmother's house and I saw a dude's car in the driveway. And I'm like, I was visiting my grandmother. And the next thing I knew, he hauled off and slapped me right there on the sofa. And immediately I knew then, I'm about to be abused again. I'm about to be abused like my mom, like my grandmother. So we lived together in that first apartment for a little while, and the abuse continued. Punches, kicks, slaps, emotional, psychological abuse. I started working in the strip club to make money, to make ends meet, just to keep a roof over my head. Sometimes he'd steal money and take the money from me, and I'd worked really hard to make the rent money, and I'd have to go back and work and make it again. We moved quite a few times together, and eventually I became pregnant, gave birth to my oldest son. I got pregnant again with my daughter right after I gave birth to my son, about a month or two later, so my kids are about 12 months apart. But throughout that whole process, he was abusing me while I was pregnant. There was an instance where I was beat on the side of the highway on I-20, and he was angry because I said I'd call someone to help me get a car. And he pulled over and jumped out of the car and came around to my side, opened the door and began punching me, and I'm holding my belly. He gets back in the car when he's done, and we start driving down the road, and the next thing you know, he starts to hitting me while we're driving. I took off my shoe and I started pulling the Ike and Tina situation. I started hitting him with my shoe. And I wanted to fight back because I was tired of the abuse. And later down the road, we had hit 285, and he pulled over, got off the highway, dropped me off at a gas station, threw me out, threw my dance clothes out on the side of the road, and I had to find a way home late at night. And that went on for a couple of years. The breaking point came when we were landing I was in my apartment, and he had come in the house, and my 1-year-old son and I were in the bedroom. I had a little boom box sitting on the table in the bedroom. We were in a 1-bedroom apartment, so me, him, and the baby slept in the same room, and I was pregnant with my daughter. And he had come in the room really upset, really angry. He had been out all day. And then the next thing you know, he comes in and takes the boom box and turns the music off. And we weren't bothering anyone. We're, in here by ourselves, just singing praise and worship songs. I'm teaching my son to sing, and he leaves the room, and I turn it back on again. And then he comes in and picks up the radio and throws it on the floor and breaks it into pieces, a huge boom box. And I told him, I said, why did you do that? We weren't doing anything to bother you. I think he was high on something or drunk. But the next thing I know, I picked up my son, I was holding him, and he hauled off and punched me like you would punch a man. And he punched me so hard that I fell back on the floor, and the infant hit his head on the bed, and my son had a bleeding head. Well, that night I got up after nursing my child's head. I got up and I told him, I said, if you ever hurt my child again, I got up and I got a knife, and I went in the living room where he was, and I said, if you ever hurt my child again, I'll kill you. And I walked away and I got in the bed. I still had the knife in my hand. I'm laying in the bed, knife is in my hand. My son's on the side of me up against the wall. I was afraid to go to sleep. I started dozing a little bit. And a little while later, I opened my eyes and he's standing over me with another knife. And he goes, if you ever threaten me again, we'll all die. That was my breaking point. That was when I knew it was time to go, because we both were willing to die. Knives and weapons were in place, and an infant was laying in the bed, and there was no regard for the fact that there was an infant there. That was the breaking point, and I started making plans to leave. It was hard. There were days when I didn't tell him I wanted to leave, that I was in the process of leaving. I was his bread and butter. So obviously I couldn't just say I'm leaving, because there would be some reaction. Well, I started saving money. I started putting things away, and I started putting furniture on layaway that he had no idea about. I would keep food in my car and keep jugs of juice in the trunk of the car. And I'd get in the car with the kids, especially on weekends, because I didn't have work to disappear to. So we'd get up early in the morning for choir rehearsal or for church, and I'd pack enough clothes and food for the whole day. And we'd drive around, even if I had nowhere to go. I'd find someone to visit and we'd stay there. And people would be like, why are you getting juice out the trunk of the car? They didn't realize I was avoiding abuse at home. And I knew that if we'd stayed away from home long enough throughout the day, then by the time we got home, he'd be too tired to fight. So I'd get home at night and wash the babies up, get them ready for bed, and we'd get in the bed quick, fast, in a hurry as soon as we got there. And that went on for quite a while. When it got close to time for me to go, there was another young lady that I was friends with, and she dated his brother. And she knew about my plans. We were working together on the same job, and I believe that she told him what happened, because he came in one night, we were in bed, and he snatched us out of bed and he threw me on the floor, and he jumped on top of me and was screaming and hollering and saying to me, you're planning to leave me, you're planning to leave me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He was choking me, banging my head on the floor. And I said, no, we're not leaving, we're not going anywhere. I knew we were leaving. Over that weekend, he held us hostage in the apartment for about 2 days. He wouldn't allow me to leave with my baby. I tried to leave once. He kicked me out of the apartment, pulled the baby out of my hand. I'm fighting, laying on the floor, holding onto the door, trying to keep the door pried open to keep him from kicking me, hurting me, keep him from closing the door with the baby on the inside. Eventually, I got back in because he closed the door, but I knew that I couldn't leave. He wouldn't allow me to leave without a fight. I eventually had to call the police and have him arrested for false imprisonment, just to give myself 48 hours over the weekend to get out of the house and move into my own apartment. It amazed me that after 15 years of being free from domestic violence, that domestic violence could find its way back into my life again. I'd been free from my children's father for many years and knew that I was a survivor and a victor, but unfortunately abuse decided to creep back into my life in a different format and a different package. My second husband came along knowing exactly what I wanted in a man, and he took advantage on that. He played on my emotions. He played on knowing how to play the part of being a God-fearing man that could go to church with me, that would hold hands and pray, that knew the word, knew the Bible. For the first year of our courtship, there was no sign of abuse. He was one person. And then a month after the wedding, he became someone totally different. I found out that there were some mental illnesses that he wrestled with all of his life, and those things began to unravel right before my eyes. And so for 3 years, I was abused all over again. The self-esteem went through the floor because I'm wondering, how did I allow this to happen to my life again? And I learned at that point that abuse chooses its own victims. No woman ever chooses abuse. Abuse shows up in its own package, in its own timing. And that led me to be so frustrated that I said, I've got to make a difference. I've got to teach others how to not just get free, but how to stay free. And that's why I started the Freedom Soul Foundation.